head of the administration of the President of Ukraine, and the briefing of Mr. Shymkiv is within the framework of the Ukrainian Media Center for Reform and with the support of Vidrodzenie Foundation. Yesterday we asked to move our briefing because of some events next to Verkhovna Rada. First of all, I greet everybody with congratulate everybody on the adoption of anti-corruption laws. And yesterday the President signed a decree on the Anti-Corruption Council. I'd like to dwell on this because creation of these bodies is a rather significant step forward in the fight against corruption in our country. We have to understand that the fight against corruption in the country with the level of corruption that we have in Ukraine requires constant attention on the part of the President, and the council that's been created has 17 members, a chair and a secretary. Half of them are representatives of public organizations, expert milieu, and the Council of Local Self-Government. This is a rather serious step because this will allow to continue the work involving the public society to develop and control legislation. And control is very important because the adoption of laws is, of course, very important, but next we should implement some very specific measures, analyze what's going on now, analyze what we need to provide for, and analysis of what's going on everywhere in the world. And believe me, in many countries of the world, even where their level of corruption is not high, there are constant regular work of respective anti-corruption councils. I will comment on several topics that pertain to reforms, such as sort of as digest. Recently, the Minister of Justice told us about their reform of the court system. There's a team at the President's administration who work in this direction, headed by Alexei Filatov. We have some remarks, and we have also some amendments from the public, because we hope that there should have been a broader discussion. Not all the issues are agreed. There are still issues about the so-called economic courts, whether the courts should be made subjects of economic activity, and the team headed by Alexei Filatov is actively working in this direction, involving the public society to the discussion. Also, there are some developments as far as electronic digital signature is concerned, and we have some disagreements with the Ministry of Justice. We have to take into account the experience of European countries, so we are waiting for a broader public discussion. And the Executive Committee of Reforms, that is attached at the National Council of Reforms, decided to take break from our sessions, our weekly sessions. We will see what's happening in this sphere, because, you know, part of the members of the National Executive Council for Reforms are taking part in the election campaign. So we decided to take a break until the end of the election campaign. As you know, there's also the government resolution about 3G. We're now involved in preparation of the competition for the tender. We expect that the work must be finalized before the 1st of November, but you understand that this is a rather short term, plus also the election campaign. So I think that the tender will, or the competition on 3G will rather end next year. Maybe in January at best. This is very important because this will give us opportunity to get additional money for the state budget. The discussion of Strategy 2020 is going on. We have received over 200 feedbacks, including the voting on the indicators and the feedback on additional indicators. We also get reports from experts, very many very interesting surveys and researches. There are very interesting points of view, and this will allow us to finalize the 2020 strategy. Besides, there's a joint team of the administration of the President at the Cabinet of Ministers, headed by Vice Premier Grossman, about the 2015-2017 integration plan that the European Commission requires for Europe, for donors, because the President announced the investment conference that will take place next January in Kharkiv, and for this investment conference, you have to have a very clear-cut plan for the next 3 years. Besides, we conduct consultations with international experts about the events that happened at the sitting of the board of the IMF. We got very interesting information that there are certain expectations internationally about the stabilization plan of Ukraine. They are paying attention to Strategy 2020 as a vision of the country, but they ask us to work on details, and we start to work. I think this is all. This is a digest of what's going on. We will do this every week. Sometimes we will have some loud statements, sometimes no. But we have to periodically sum up what's happening. I congratulate everybody on the adoption of the package of anti-corruption laws. This is very important, but this is just the beginning. We congratulate you too. We hope that these laws will be an additional stimulus for the processes. But on the basis of the digest that you announced now, are you satisfied with the course of reforms? No, I think that in many issues we should move faster, and we could move faster. The results of the compromises that were found in the parliament after the first discussion of anti-corruption laws, the public do not always agree with these compromises, but you should understand that this is a political issue and political process, and we have to get used to this. For instance, in European countries, in whose direction we are moving, the joint work of public and politicians is, as a rule, the result of resulting in the changes that are taking place in these countries. Before the today's press briefing, there was a round table about electronic purchases, which is one of our most important directions that we are working. And very briefly, I'd like to tell you that at the moment, the Ukrainian developers started to work on this product. The result of this should be pilot implementation, and many state establishments volunteered to take part in this experiment. The threshold of purchases here is 1,000 hryvnia for commodities and 1 million hryvnia for services. For instance, the State Department that services the administration of the President are actively participating in this experiment, and the approximate value of the sum at the expense of which the purchases are going to happen is 2.9 million hryvnia, and this pertains to, for instance, paper, lighting, water, electricity supply, batteries, and there are very specific things that can be shown, and how we can demonstrate how electronic purchases can be organized within the framework of the current legislation. The product will be developed with joint efforts, and when it is ready, there will be 2 months long testing of the product, and the decision will be then given to the Cabinet of Ministers for a scale introduction, and then the Cabinet of Ministers will adopt the decision how they will do this. And there's a lot of options. But the main thing that we have now, then when the state does not have money but has a problem, the society unites and creates a specific product for a specific problem. This is an experiment, but there are state bodies that are ready to take part in the experiment, and I think that this will be very useful for the country.
Could you please tell a little bit more about this anti-corruption council and what's the difference between it and the anti-corruption committee, and how soon will the committee start operating? We now need to differentiate to see what are the powers. Anti-corruption committee is a preventive body. It analyzes the tax declarations of civil servants, but developing the long-term policy is the responsibility of the president, and for that he sets up the council, which will help develop such a policy, and he invites different representatives of the authorities, experts, civil society representatives, who will together be developing the policy in anti-corruption, and also they will be monitoring the legislation which is effective. Forming the policy is the visionary role of the president. It's long-term planning and control. That's the role of the National Council. The National Committee is a preventive activity. National Anti-Corruption Bureau is an investigation body which investigates specific cases. We see the distribution of powers between different bodies. As to how quickly the laws will be signed, after that the Cabinet of Ministers has to set it up. Then there's a procedure which is quite standard. I hope this will be done quickly, because there's a quite interesting experience of Georgia as to online decisions, as an online solution which helps to monitor the declarations of civil servants. That's a public website. You can see all the declarations of civil servants of Georgia. This project was developed within 4 months by a team of young people, Georgian young people, that was done within their civil service. It is possible to do it quite quickly if we use the model which we propose for public procurements, which will be based on crowdsourcing. This will speed up the process. But the experience of Georgia is that in 4 months the system was introduced. Those people who were doing it are ready to help us. I met with them. Georgia received for that the World Award for this solution. I have 2 questions. One, aren't you afraid that another institution in the field of combating corruption will lead to what's happening with reforms? We have so many centers of reforms, so many reformers, but it moves slowly. And second, you are talking about compromises which are were done on the way of this work. And also, do you believe that's an acceptable compromise, what happened yesterday? Back to the number of bodies of different commissions and committees, we need to understand that there are different roles which are to be executed, talking about leading or heading the state organization or the body, any institution. There are some operational activities, some preventive activities, punitive activities, and so on, investigatory. And we need to understand that the different functions should be with different institutions. And sometimes when we merge the functions, we need to understand what are the limits. This is to be understood. Talking about National Council on Anti-Corruption Policy, we need it. Again, it's like an example. This is some topic on which the whole community should be working, developing the policy. Additional bodies are also needed because what we have in the state with the corruption, it requires attraction of many people to clean it up. As to discussions of the law on prosecutor's office, well, it's better to make a small step, but it is still a step. It's better than continue this lengthy discussion. I believe we need to make step by step, move step by step. I have the same question. It's either about culture or personnel. Today I would like to ask about personnel. Is there any program to train the personnel, the human resources, who would replace the old civil servants? Because now people will be dismissed, but who will be replacing them? Thank you for your question. We understand perfectly well, and that's discussed in the presidential administration, in the cabinet of ministers, where we'll be looking for people who can replace these civil servants. Do we need so many civil servants? Maybe we need to cancel some resolutions. Can we invite foreigners like it's done in many countries of the world? This all requires legislative changes. We develop for ourselves different options. If you have some proposals about how this could be done, but I can tell you that not many people are ready. Those who are ready, they do not always have required qualification and experience. I will give you an example. To do high-quality interview, that is quite a lengthy process because things that were not paid attention at are values of those people who work in civil service. And for me, that's the major criteria when I select people to my team. If they have different values, I do not work with them. Thank you, Mr. Shymkiv, and I hope that next meeting will be next Tuesday as planned.